Dating today feels cooked for a lot of men, but compared to what men in history went through, this is just a different kind of battlefield. I know that because I've been there. I hit a point in my life where things felt low, where it's easy to feel sorry for myself, to think that I had it harder than everyone else. And honestly, modern dating didn't help. It just made everything feel more stacked against me. But then I came across the story of Andrew Jackson. And not just the controversial stuff you hear about, but the full picture. A man who was unapologetically himself, who earned the respect of men around him, who became bold, fearless, and someone people followed. And something about that just hit me. It just gave me this sense of awe, a kind of reverence for what men before us endured. But more importantly, it gave me a sense of empowerment. Like, maybe I don't need easier circumstances. Maybe I just need to become stronger. But before we get into his famous duels, why did they call him Old Hickory? Most of us start life in comfort as children and then face hardships as we grow into adulthood. But for Andrew Jackson, he started life on brutal mode. You see, before Jackson was even born, his father died in a logging accident. He grew up in a very poor frontier home raised by his mother. When he was just 12 years old, he and his brother joined the fight against the British in the Revolutionary War. Unfortunately, he was captured and imprisoned. The British officer told him to clean his boots, and when he defiantly refused that order, the officer took the sword and sliced his face open, giving him a lifelong scar. And conditions in that British camp were brutal. It was overcramped, filthy, and disease-ridden with smallpox. Andrew Jackson's mom, Elizabeth Jackson, heard that her sons were captured, and she traveled 50 miles on horseback to go get her sons back. She walked straight into the enemy's camp and negotiated for their release. Andrew's brother was so sick that he was slumped over the back of a horse while she and Andrew walked the 50 miles back to their home. And just as a side note, I want to acknowledge how incredible the stories of real women are. We get so much goy slop in the modern media of girl bosses, indestructible Mary Sues, yawn. We actually have real life examples of extraordinary women that we don't need to try to convince women that they're kung fu, ass-kicking, legendary men. Anyway, shortly after they arrived home, Andrew's older brother died, and his mother, Elizabeth, went back to the front lines as a nurse, where she caught cholera and died too. But it wasn't just his hardships that earned him the nickname Old Hickory. He was a genuine alpha giga chad. To start, he married Rachel Donaldson, who was going through a divorce. And because of this, she was constantly mocked and ridiculed and had her name dragged through the mud. Jackson was always willing to defend her honor. He had dozens of fist fights, sword fights, and pistol duels. The most famous duel he had was with Charles Dickinson. No, not that one, where he insulted his wife's honor. Jackson told Dickinson, "You shoot first." He did shoot first, and he shot him in the chest. Then Jackson aimed his gun at him and killed the man. The bullet stayed in his chest for the rest of his life. Jackson was always willing to kick someone's ass if he was insulted. And this is one of the reasons they called him Old Hickory. And this is a quality I think that we've lost as men. Someone acting the fool, oh, well, we'll call the police and who will get there in 25 minutes, half hour. And if they're arrested at all, the judge will just look at him and say, oh, poor baby, this isn't your fault. You grew up in a poor home, in a poor neighborhood, and disadvantaged, yada, yada. I'm here to tell you that a lot of people need their asses kicked. Society would be better if men could demand respect from the usual suspects. You know what I mean? At age 35, he was elected as general to the Tennessee militia. Not because he was wealthy or had connections like we see in modern politics. He was voted in because he had a reputation of being tough, fearless, willing to fight, and defend his and others' honor. He did not break under pressure. It's hard to convey just how much grit he had, and in frontier America, grit mattered more than credentials. In the War of 1812, he didn't just fight the British. He navigated alliances. He turned some Indian tribes into allies while defeating other tribes that were aligned with the British. And he didn't just command the troops either. He literally led in front of them. When the troops were cold, hungry, and demoralized, he actually stood in front of them and he said, "Look, if any of you turn tail and run, I'll kill the first man to leave." And after this speech, he went on to win a decisive victory. There were a lot of anecdotes where he would put wounded men on his horse and walk them back to camp after the battles. And this was especially poignant because he walked with a cane. He carried multiple bullets in his body from gun duels, including one in his leg. And after years of fighting in the war, his body was worn down and broken. The cane he used for walking was another reason they called him Old Hickory. And the hardships didn't end there. While he was winning the presidency, he was losing his wife. The slander aimed at his wife was so bad, she actually had a heart attack and died from the stress. And he always blamed the media for slandering his wife for her death. Andrew had some real downs in his life, but he had some real high points too. When he was inaugurated, he just let regular people into the White House where they were partying all night long. They broke furniture, spilled drinks, and the working men got their muddy boots all over the floor. The party was so crazy that they moved the booze outdoors and Jackson had to escape out the window and stay the night in a hotel. Speaking of parties, when he was on his way out, he invited the public to come into the White House and help him eat a 1,400-pound wheel of cheese, proving once again that he was a man of the people and not the elites. The cheese smell in the White House lasted for weeks after that. Now, I have to tell you Andrew Jackson's greatest achievement. He killed the bank. He believed banks were too powerful and they created an elite class that ruled over the everyman. They were too corrupt. Why should these men rule over us? He vetoed Congress' renewal of the Second Bank of the United States, which was America's central bank. He ordered all the currency in that central bank to be divided up into many smaller banks throughout the country, and this weakened the global elite's power. Of course, the global elites didn't like this. He was attacked by politicians and bankers and the elite alike, but instead of capitulating, he doubled down. The economy was unstable for a bit, but he had won, and the bank eventually collapsed. But for him, this wasn't just policy. He saw himself as one of the people. What he was doing was returning power to the people from the entrenched aristocracy. In a world controlled by powerful elites, he didn't back down from them. He dismantled them. It's too bad Jackson wasn't here in 2008, where the banks destroyed the economy and got bailed out for it, while the common man lost his jobs and his home. Before I tell you how this all relates to you, I need to address his most controversial moment, the Trail of Tears. Andrew Jackson presided over the Indian Removal Act of 1830. The way Jackson saw it, this was an unstable time in world history, a time where survival wasn't guaranteed, where nations were expanding or being erased. He believed the native tribes and the American settlers could not coexist in the long term, and that removal would prevent constant war. By the way, this was widely supported at the time. There had been years of violence on the frontier, raids, retaliation, and war with the American Indians. And many Americans believed that the conflict would never truly stop. There were some frontiersmen like Davy Crockett who actually opposed this. And because in Crockett's mind, despite the pockets of violence, some tribes like the Cherokee were actually adopting American-style governments, farming, and the Cherokee actually sued Georgia and won a Supreme Court case. The Indians, who had helped Jackson defeat the British, felt that they had earned the right to their own nations. American expansion had taken root, and given the false dichotomy between extermination and removal, Congress, supported by Jackson, relocated the Indians. This event is called the Trail of Tears because of about the 16,000 Indians that were relocated. Approximately 4,000 of them perished over the 1,000-mile journey that they made on foot. Now, I'm not going to ad hoc support or condemn the decision that led to the tragedy, but rather I want to give you context to consider. Let's say you, dear viewer, were the president at the time, and Congress orders you to remove the Indians, and the Supreme Court orders you to give Americans sovereignty. Well, option one, you support the law like Jackson did, and you secure stability, but at a high moral cost. Option two, you veto the law and you lose the support of Congress, and the local states move ahead and do it anyway. This could have potentially triggered civil war 15 to 30 years earlier than it would have happened. Or option three, you can try to negotiate integration with the Indians. The settlers, they just weren't going to stop settling, and this would have continued the frontier skirmishes between the Indians and the settlers. And this option likely only delayed the political conflict and pushed it down the road. And that's what most politicians nowadays do, by the way. They just kick the can down the road. But either way, there really wasn't a good solution here, and each one carried its own cost. And that was the reality of leadership back then. Most people, when I tell them my favorite president was Andrew Jackson, they say almost immediately, "What about the Trail of Tears?" And yes, looking back through our modern lens of morality, it's easy to condemn the relocation because it caused so many Indians to perish. Being a good man doesn't mean that you're always going to be 100% right all the time. You're going to make mistakes, and the more responsibility you have, the greater opportunity you have to make the mistakes, and the greater the consequences of those mistakes are going to be. So that's how you, as a modern man, are going to define your legacy. And you're going to need to make hard decisions and stand by those decisions, even if you're vilified for it. But what does all this have to do with modern dating? Well, I want you to first off know that I know how hard it is. I know modern dating is hard. DEI hiring policies have led to fewer men getting good jobs. Preferential college admissions are leaving men behind. Dating apps are distorting reality to such a degree that men who are under 6 feet tall might as well not exist. And the ones that are 6 feet tall are completely replaceable. Women are ditching starting families and instead opting for careers. And men who do get married are run through the absolute ringer in divorce courts. You're told by movies and media that you need to be more effeminate, more sensitive, and that your masculinity is toxic and bad. Every generation of men since the baby boomers have gotten progressively less wealthy, to the point now where the average first-time homebuyer is 40 years old. I get it. I get that it's hard. My own life has been extremely difficult. And that's why I wanted to make this video, because as hard as it is, I don't think anyone could look at the life of Andrew Jackson and think, well, I have it way harder than he did. And that's the whole point. Life is hard for men. It always has been. It always will be. We are survivors and we're problem solvers. And most of all, we're adaptable. It's easy to get demoralized and think that you are just trapped with the status quo. There's a lot we can learn from history. History is a long stretch of nothing happens, nothing happens, nothing happens. And then all of a sudden something happens. And when that something happens, it changes everything. And we could be on the cusp of that change again. And it's times like these where we need you to be a man like Andrew Jackson. Firm, resolute, and tough to kill. Our matriarchal power structure can only sedate us with bread and circuses for so long before we take back our masculinity. I'm optimistic. We're already seeing the pendulum swing back in the other direction. Channels like mine and many others are popping up, helping men take back control of their lives. By the way, if that's something you would like help with, check. There's a link in the description. At the end of the day, men are defined by what they overcome. Even though the battlefield has changed, the struggle is the same. The question is, Are you going to rise to it? Thanks for watching.